They told you hard work guarantees success. That's a lie. The game was never fair. It was rigged before you ever started. But once you understand how the few escape average, you can too. Most people go through life believing in what I call the great illusion, the myth of fair play. From the earliest days of childhood, we are taught that if we simply follow the rules, keep our heads down, do what we're told, and work hard, success will eventually be ours. We are told that life is a level playing field, that everyone has an equal shot, and that justice prevails for those who are patient, honest, and disciplined. But look around you. Truly look. If this were true, then why are the hardest working people often the ones with the least to show for it? Why do some rise effortlessly, while others, despite grinding year after year, never seem to break free from financial struggle, obscurity, or limitation? Let's consider a young man named Marcus. He was raised to believe that the path to success was linear: get good grades, attend college, and secure a respectable job. Marcus did everything right. He graduated with honors, took a corporate position, and obeyed every instruction from management. But as years passed, he watched colleagues with less experience, but more confidence, more networking savvy, and more boldness rise faster than he did. One day, Marcus watched as a junior employee with a powerful last name and polished social skills leapfrogged over him for a major promotion. That was the first crack in the illusion. Marcus began to realize that the game wasn't played on effort alone. It was played on influence, relationships, strategy, and perception, things he had never been taught to value. This pattern is not rare. It is common. In every industry, you'll find individuals who never colored inside the lines, who disrupted the system rather than conform to it, and were rewarded for it. You'll also find countless people like Marcus, sitting quietly in the back row of life, wondering when their turn will come, waiting for justice that will never arrive. The myth of fair play tells them that being good is enough, but success does not respond to goodness. It responds to boldness, vision, and the willingness to take what you believe is yours. In truth, the rules of the game are written by those who have already won. They create the standards, define the qualifications, and shape the narrative. And the masses, trusting the fairness of the system, never stop to question who is truly benefiting from their obedience. Schools reward conformity. Workplaces reward political correctness and predictability. But the marketplace, the real world, rewards value, leverage, courage, and independence of thought. Most people are so busy playing by the rules that they never consider rewriting them. Take, for example, the entrepreneur who drops out of college to start a business. Society calls him reckless until he becomes successful. Then they call him a genius. Why? Because he refused to believe in the myth. He realized the system was not designed to create leaders, but followers. The system teaches you how to survive within the walls of limitation, not how to escape them. The entrepreneur, unlike Marcus, did not wait for permission. He did not assume life would hand him success on a silver platter because he was doing the right thing. He understood that the real world does not care about what you deserve. It responds only to what you demand and create for yourself. This is the painful truth behind the myth of fair play. It is a comforting story told to maintain order, but it is not the story that produces extraordinary lives. Those who achieve uncommon success know this. They do not wait to be chosen. They choose themselves. They do not ask for fairness. They operate in reality. They understand that the system is not broken. It was built this way from the beginning, and if you want to rise, you must stop waiting for the game to become fair and start playing to win regardless of the rules. There is no force more powerful in shaping a man's destiny than the possession of a clear, burning, definite purpose. Not a vague wish, not a list of random goals, and not a fleeting ambition that evaporates at the first sign of difficulty, but a single, all-consuming purpose that grips the mind, galvanizes the spirit, and commands every action. Most people never define what they truly want. They drift from one task to the next, following opportunity wherever it appears, responding to life rather than creating it. Their efforts are scattered, their energies diluted, and their results predictably mediocre. The individual with a definite purpose, however, channels his thoughts and efforts like a focused beam of light. He does not waste time wondering what he should be doing. He knows, and because he knows, he moves forward with an intensity and discipline that those without purpose cannot comprehend. Let me illustrate this with the story of a young woman named Clara. Clara grew up in a modest neighborhood, surrounded by people who spoke often of dreams, but rarely pursued them. Most of her peers were content with jobs that paid just enough to get by, weekends spent numbing the mind with distractions, and a life of routines designed more for comfort than for growth. But Clara was different. At the age of 15, she discovered a book about aviation in her school library. That book ignited something in her, a vision so vivid and intoxicating that from that moment on, she decided she would become a pilot. It was not a casual dream. It was a decision backed by unshakable purpose. From that day, every choice she made was weighed against that purpose. She studied harder, took on part-time jobs to pay for flying lessons, skipped the social distractions that consumed her peers, and sought out mentors in the aviation field. She faced countless obstacles, lack of money, skepticism from those around her, and even moments of fear that made her question whether she was capable. But none of these things stopped her, because her purpose burned hotter than her fear. Years later, Clara didn't just become a pilot. She became one of the youngest female captains at a major airline. People called her lucky, but those who knew her story understood that her achievements were the product of focused intention. Clara had what most people lack: a definite purpose backed by a plan, fueled by persistence, and protected by faith in herself. Her path wasn't easy, but it was clear, because she had defined it. Most people never even take the time to decide what they want from life. They react to whatever shows up, chasing jobs for money, relationships for comfort, and goals because others expect it of them. But Clara's life is a case study in the power of deciding what you want with such clarity that everything else becomes either a tool or a distraction. She did not wander. She pursued. What's most striking about the power of definite purpose is how it simplifies life. It removes confusion. It erases excuses. When you know exactly where you're going, you stop wasting time on detours. The man with a purpose doesn't need external motivation because his mission pulls him forward from within. He doesn't wonder if he's doing the right thing because his destination is fixed. He doesn't fear obstacles because his mind is already committed to the outcome. Purpose gives meaning to discipline. It gives strength to sacrifice. It makes rejection irrelevant and fear manageable. While others are searching for inspiration, he is already in motion. While others hesitate, he advances. While others wait for approval, he creates momentum with his own belief. That is the quiet, unshakable power of definite purpose. It doesn't just push you forward, it transforms you into the kind of person who can no longer tolerate being average. Fear is the most cunning and destructive force known to man, not because of its ferocity, but because of its subtlety. It rarely roars, it whispers. It operates not through force, but through suggestion. It plants small seeds of doubt in the fertile ground of the human mind and waits patiently while they grow into towering walls of limitation. Most people will go their entire lives enslaved by fears they never took the time to name, much less confront. They fear poverty, so they cling to safe jobs and avoid risk. They fear criticism, so they hide their opinions and silence their ambition. They fear rejection, so they don't ask, don't try, and don't dare. And all the while, they pretend they are being rational, responsible, mature, when in truth, they are imprisoned by a quiet terror that governs their every choice. Fear doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. In fact, the most dangerous fears are the ones that feel like common sense. Let me tell you about a man named Thomas. Thomas was a gifted writer. From a young age, he had a rare talent with language, the ability to tell stories that could stir the soul and captivate a room. Friends would beg him to publish his work, professors urged him to pursue a career in literature, and strangers who heard him speak would say, "You have something special." But Thomas didn't believe them, or rather, he believed them, but not enough to challenge the voice of fear that lived in his mind. That voice whispered, "What if you fail? What if people laugh? What if they say you're not good enough?" So Thomas played it safe. He took a job in a cubicle, one that paid the bills and offered stability, and he wrote only in private, stuffing his best ideas into notebooks he never shared. Year after year passed, and with each one the fear grew bolder and the voice louder, until even the idea of trying felt like a threat. His talent became a torment. He watched lesser writers succeed, not because they were better, but because they had dared to risk what he had feared. And though he told himself he was waiting for the right time, deep down he knew he was hiding. Fear had wrapped itself around his potential and made comfort look like wisdom. What makes fear so devastating is that it doesn't need to overpower you. It only needs to convince you to stop. 1 second of hesitation is all it takes. 1 moment of second guessing, 1 glance at someone else's judgment, 1 small compromise on what you know you should do. And suddenly, fear takes the reins. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like procrastination. Sometimes it wears the mask of humility or responsibility. "I'm not ready," you say. "It's not the right time." But underneath those words is the quiet grip of fear, tightening its chain, ensuring you never stray too far from the herd. And because everyone around you is also afraid of risk, afraid of ridicule, afraid of standing out, you begin to think your paralysis is normal. That's how fear survives, through collective silence, through the shared agreement that safety is preferable to freedom, even if it means killing the voice within you that cries out for more. Consider how many lives are quietly destroyed by this invisible enemy. The artist who never paints, the entrepreneur who never launches, the speaker who never speaks, the man who loves but never says the words. Fear stops more dreams than failure ever will. And the tragedy is that most people never even realize they were chained until it's too late. They confuse a long life with a full life, forgetting that you can exist for decades and never truly live a single day. The chain of fear isn't made of metal, it's made of moments, decisions, and beliefs that slowly shrink your world until the cage becomes comfortable. What begins as a whisper becomes your truth. And once it becomes your truth, you stop trying to escape. You rationalize, you justify, you decorate the cage and call it home. Environment is not merely the space around you. It is the atmosphere that shapes your thoughts, values, and self-image in ways so subtle that you rarely recognize the influence until you've been changed by it. A man may begin with ambition in his heart, but if he surrounds himself with voices that mock ambition, he will soon doubt the value of his own dreams. He may begin with courage, but if he walks daily among those who fear change and avoid risk, his bravery will dissolve into hesitation. Human beings are not static creatures. We are impressionable by nature. Just as iron sharpens iron, dull metal dulls whatever it touches. Your surroundings, physical, social, mental, either refine your potential or rust it. And the tragedy is that most people are born into environments of limitation, then grow so accustomed to the temperature of mediocrity that they never imagine a world beyond it. Take the story of Elijah, a young man born into a blue-collar neighborhood where survival was the priority and dreaming was a luxury. In his community, the only accepted paths were factory work, government jobs, or small trade. Any attempt at something greater was met with suspicion or ridicule. Elijah, however, had a mind for invention. As a boy, he would take apart radios and build miniature machines out of scrap metal. He read books on engineering while his peers played video games or gathered to mock the smart kid. His father, well-meaning but limited by his own conditioning, urged him to get a real job and forget the foolish notion of inventing things for a living. His friends teased him whenever he spoke with passion, and over time Elijah found himself lowering his voice, dumbing down his ideas, and hiding parts of himself to blend in. Though the fire in his mind still burned, the air around him was thick with smoke, the smoke of fear, small thinking, and complacency, and like a fire starved of oxygen, his dreams began to flicker. It wasn't that Elijah lacked talent or ambition. It was that he was trying to rise in an environment that pulled him back to the ground like gravity. It wasn't until Elijah earned a scholarship and moved away to a university that he finally encountered a different kind of association, one that breathed life into his dormant identity. Surrounded by ambitious minds, inventive spirits, and mentors who encouraged bold thought rather than belittled it, he began to come alive again. Conversations that would have been mocked back home were now met with excitement. Failure was seen not as a shameful sign of incompetence, but as a natural step in innovation. In that new environment, Elijah's self-perception shifted. He no longer felt the need to hide his ideas or dim his light. Within 2 years, he had designed and prototyped a device that would later become the core of his first startup. The same boy who once questioned whether it was silly to dream was now being praised in rooms filled with investors, thinkers, and fellow creators. His transformation wasn't the result of a change in skill. It was the result of a change in soil. A flower cannot bloom in concrete, no matter how strong the seed. Elijah had not been broken. He had been planted in the wrong garden. What few people grasp is that your associations speak louder than your intentions. You may intend to grow, to rise, to succeed, but if your daily circle consists of those who complain, procrastinate, and settle, you will find yourself slowly absorbing their habits. Not out of weakness, but out of proximity. The mind adopts what it is exposed to. If everyone you know fears change, you will begin to second-guess your risks. If everyone around you mocks ambition, you will begin to shrink your goals. And it happens gradually, like erosion, not in a single moment, but over time, as the sharp edges of your purpose are worn down by the constant friction of negative influence. Associations are not neutral. They either feed your vision or feed your doubt. The man who walks with lions develops the courage to roar. The one who walks with sheep learns only to bleat and follow. That is the quiet power of environment. Not that it shouts you down, but that it trains you to whisper when you were born to speak with thunder. There is a quiet danger that haunts more lives than poverty, more destructive than failure, and more seductive than distraction: the trap of passive living. It is not dramatic. It does not come with alarm bells or crisis. In fact, it disguises itself as comfort, as safety, as the illusion of getting by. The passive life is not marked by catastrophe, but by a slow erosion of spirit. It begins innocently. A person takes a job for now, promises to chase their dream one day, or tells themselves that they'll start next month, and then next month turns into next year, and next year becomes a decade. They wake up, go through the motions, pay their bills, fulfill their obligations, and return home just in time to distract themselves from the gnawing emptiness within. The trap is not that life is hard, it's that it's easy enough to tolerate. There is no fire beneath them, no urgency to act, and so they drift like a boat without a sail. And because the world applauds stability and punishes disruption, they are never questioned, never challenged, only slowly buried under routine, day by day, until the life they were meant to live becomes a silent ghost. Consider the story of Jacob, a man with a sharp mind and a natural talent for design. In college, he had drawn up ambitious plans to start a creative agency that would specialize in branding for small businesses. His ideas were fresh, his vision clear, and his passion unmistakable. But when graduation arrived, so did the responsibilities: loans, bills, expectations. So Jacob took an entry-level marketing job just for a year, while he saved up and figured out how to start his company. 1 year turned into two, two into five. He earned promotions, moved into a nicer apartment, got used to the paycheck. The dream still lingered in the back of his mind, but every time it surfaced, it was met with justifications. Now's not the right time. I have a good thing going. Maybe once I'm more prepared. Meanwhile, he commuted through traffic, sat in meetings that drained him, and poured his creativity into other people's visions. He stopped designing for himself. His passion became a hobby he rarely practiced, and although he couldn't quite name the ache in his chest, he knew something was off. It wasn't pain exactly, it was numbness. He had fallen into the trap of passive living. He wasn't failing, but he wasn't free. What makes this trap so insidious is that it rarely triggers alarm. No one intervenes when you stop chasing your goals because the world rewards consistency even if it's killing your potential. Your boss is happy you show up. Your friends admire your stability. Your family applauds your responsibility. But deep inside, a different voice speaks, the voice of what you could have become. It speaks in quiet moments, in the middle of the night, in long stares out of windows. It whispers, "This isn't it." And still, most people silence that voice with distraction. They scroll, they binge, they plan hypothetical futures that never arrive. They convince themselves that as long as they are not suffering, they are succeeding. But absence of pain is not the presence of purpose. Passive living lulls a person into comfort, not because they lack ambition, but because they never made the decision to be active participants in their own lives. Life was meant to be lived deliberately, to create, to strive, to build, to fall, to rise again. But passive living removes the striving and replaces it with settling, not for what is possible, but for what is convenient. When a person lives passively, they begin to outsource their direction. They wait for circumstances to improve before they act. They wait for the perfect moment, the ideal conditions, the green light that never comes. They tell themselves that life is just happening for now, when in reality, this for now becomes the rest of their life. Days blur into weeks, weeks into years, and still they wait. They never ask, "What do I want?" because they are too busy reacting to what they are given. The trap deepens every time a decision is deferred, every time a risk is avoided, every time a goal is postponed in favor of ease. Before long, the man who once dreamed of living with fire becomes the man who merely exists. And what makes it so tragic is that he doesn't even know he's trapped, because the walls were built so slowly, so gently, that they felt like shelter, not a cage. Passive living is the slow death of a powerful soul, not by force, but by fatigue, by distraction, and by 1,000 small compromises dressed as practicality. While the vast majority live within the boundaries laid out for them by circumstance, habit, or fear, there is a small, rare group, the 2%, who break free. These are not necessarily the wealthiest, the most educated, or even the most talented by nature's design, but they are the most awake. They are those who have refused to sleepwalk through life, who have rejected the lullabies of conformity and comfort, and who have chosen consciously to live deliberately. They understand a truth that most never learn, that life is not something that happens to you, it is something you must mold with fire, effort, and focused thought. The 2% do not stumble into success or freedom by accident. They create it step by step by taking full ownership of their minds, their time, and their choices. They examine the scripts they inherited from childhood, the beliefs implanted by their environment, and they ask the one question that the 98% never dare: does this serve me or trap me? Take, for instance, the story of Lila, born in a quiet rural town where the unspoken rules were clear. Keep your head down, take what you can get, don't dream too big. Her parents, though loving, were imprisoned by the invisible chains of generational limitation. Be thankful for what you have was repeated more often than go after what you want. Lila, like many others, almost accepted this as truth. She almost allowed her dreams to atrophy under the weight of polite expectations and small thinking. But something inside her refused to settle. She began reading biographies, listening to voices outside her circle, and learning about people who had transformed their lives not by chance, but by decision. What she discovered altered her forever. The greatest difference between those who live fully and those who merely exist is the power of intentional thought followed by bold, repeated action. So Lila began writing down her goals. Not vague wishes, but clear, measurable outcomes. She set routines. She woke up earlier. She surrounded herself with those who spoke the language of growth rather than the language of fear. And when the time came to leave her town and pursue her dream of building a sustainable fashion company, she did so, not with certainty, but with courage. She didn't wait for permission. She gave it to herself. This is how the 2% break free. They accept responsibility for everything, even the things they didn't cause. They understand that blaming the world, the system, or their past may be justified, but it changes nothing, so they stop justifying. They stop waiting. They stop hoping for ideal conditions. Instead, they take massive action. They build momentum. They fail, learn, adapt, and keep going. While others wait for the perfect moment, the 2% realize the perfect moment is built through movement. They don't chase motivation. They develop discipline. They don't consume endlessly. They create. They do not fear discomfort because they understand that growth always demands it. And because of this mindset, they begin to see results that others call luck. But it isn't luck. It is the compound effect of focused effort applied over time, while others were distracted, delayed, or discouraged. The 2% see time as their greatest asset, and so they treat each hour as sacred. They are careful with what they think, who they associate with, and how they spend their days, because they understand that days become decades, and they intend to make theirs count. What separates the 2% is not just action, it is vision. They have taken the time to define what they want, to clarify their purpose, and to align their daily behavior with that vision. Most people wander through life with a fogged windshield, reacting to the curves in the road. But the 2% drive with intention, eyes fixed on the destination, hands firm on the wheel. And when the road gets rough, they do not stop. They slow down, recalibrate, and continue forward. They are not immune to fear, but they refuse to be governed by it. They do not wait for the world to understand them. They move in spite of misunderstanding. And while the masses argue about what's possible, the 2% are quietly building, creating, improving, living lives that speak so loudly they no longer need to explain themselves. So I ask you now, will you remain in the 98%? Obedient, fearful, forgettable? Or will you rise with the few who refuse to play the rigged game? The choice is yours. And history, if you dare to defy it, is waiting to remember your name.